Okay, it's 3:30. I guess we should get started. Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm Professor Murray Norris, Deputy Director of Children's Cancer Institute, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here today. Particularly welcome ladies and gentlemen, members, directors of the board, distinguished guests and friends of the Institute, and of course all of our wonderful team of employees and students. Thank you for joining our very first virtual Children's Cancer Institute Annual General Meeting. It really is a great pleasure to have you all online with us today. Before we get started, I will go through some housekeeping information for the running of this AGM. Firstly, only members of Children's Cancer Institute can vote on the motions that will be brought forward by our chair in the formal part of the meeting. Members will be unmuted during the formalities and will be able to move and second the motions and can raise hands to speak or vote on motions. When asked by the chairman to indicate approval for a motion, members will be able to virtually raise their hand by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, then clicking the raise hand button on the bottom right of the pop-up screen. We will be welcoming over 200 guests online today and are really excited that you can all be with us. With such a large number in attendance, all non-member attendees have been automatically muted so that we can have clear and uninterrupted audio from each of our speakers today. The Q&A function at the bottom of the screen has been enabled and will be monitored during the meeting. If you have specific questions for any of the speakers today, please use the Q&A box. So on with our meeting. Our chair, Simon Truscott, will step through the agenda for the meeting shortly. I would like to note, however, that at the end of the meeting, our Executive Director, Michelle Haber, will be presenting the Institute Award to a team member who has truly lived our values over the past year. So for all our team members out there, be ready. It may be you, and we will bring the awardee on screen for Michelle to present to. I now invite our chair of our board, Simon Truscott, to complete the formal proceedings and present his address.
Welcome to everyone. As Murray was just indicating, I think we've had up to 250 people who've registered to attend today's meeting. And at last count, when I was looking at the monitor, we had well over 170. So thank you. It's a great turnout, particularly in these testing times. Before we begin the formal proceedings at this annual general meeting of the Children's Cancer Institute, which obviously for the first time we're holding via video conference, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are meeting today throughout Australia, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also extend my respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present virtually at our meeting today. Whilst we would have preferred to meet and welcome you all in person, and as is our tradition, have time after the meeting to mingle with you as our members and supporters, this year it has obviously not been possible to do so as a result of the current restrictions which have been put in place throughout Australia to minimise the health impacts of the COVID global pandemic. So I thank you each for your virtual attendance in these times. At the same time, I'd ask for your patience as together we navigate for the first time holding our annual general meeting using video conferencing facilities. Just before we started, I was making an observation that only a few moments ago there was a dog barking next door that had been going for an hour. So if you hear that in the background, if the dog starts barking again, please excuse me, but it's not something I can control. This is my second annual general meeting as chair of the Institute, and once again I'm honoured to preside over this meeting. Since I presented to you at last year's AGM, there have been a significant number of developments and changes that have impacted on the Institute, its finances, its research programs, and its future. I will provide you with my perspectives on some of those more significant developments, and we will also hear from some other members of the Institute's senior researchers and other stakeholders later in today's meeting. As outlined in the meeting agenda, we will start with my address as the chair of the Institute. This will be followed by the formalities of the meeting, including the election of directors. After each item of business during the formal part of the meeting, I will invite questions. And if you have any questions, please indicate by using the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen, as Murray indicated a few moments ago. Or for members, you can use the raise hand button, by clicking on participants and then the raise hand button on the bottom of your screen, and you will then be able to ask your question verbally. After the formal part of the meeting, I will hand over to the Institute's Executive Director, Professor Michelle Haber, who will share some of the research highlights from the past year. Michelle will then be followed by Associate Professor Mark Cowley, who will talk about the Institute's Computational Biology program, which he heads, and then a video presentation from Kirsty Everett, an inspiring childhood cancer survivor. Kirsty joins us online today as well and will be available to answer any questions after her video. So with that introduction, let me outline what I will cover today. I'll highlight for you the Institute's financial performance in 2019, which I'm pleased to report was another strong year. The fundraising achievements of the Institute last year, the key developments with the Institute's partnerships and government relations, and I'll finish with an update on the board and related governance changes, which are designed to support the Institute in meeting its challenges into the future, as well as the opportunities that are presenting themselves. And together we'll move towards achieving our goal of one day helping to cure every child's cancer. Financial performance. Let me start with the Institute's financial performance. The Institute last year performed strongly. Let me mention a few of the more significant financial results from 2019. Our revenue in 2019 of $54.8 million was the highest revenue ever recorded by the Institute, and it was $5.8 million or 12% more than in 2018. That itself was a record year. Of those total revenues, our revenues from research, including peer-reviewed grants, totaled $34.6 million, comprising about 60% of our overall revenues, and an increase of 22% on 2018, which is a real testament to the esteem in which our research is held throughout Australia and indeed the world. Our revenues from fundraising of almost $20 million in 2019 contributed to the balance of our revenues, and that result was in line with the results of 2018, which was a record year for our fundraising. So thank you again to our supporters, including many of you online throughout Australia, for your financial support during last year. Without it, the Institute simply could not do its vital research. Expenditure on medical research of $43.7 million was also the most we've ever spent on research, and that was up 16% from 2018. This is a very healthy development, reflecting a significant increase in activity across more research areas, a number of which are new areas of focus for the Institute, which is helping us to keep us at the global forefront of medical research into childhood cancer. It's also noteworthy that your Institute increased both capital and operating expenditure in some strategically important areas, including on new research equipment, new and upgraded technology infrastructure, and a new data centre. As a result, overall, we spent more than we earned in 2019, reporting a deficit of about $859,000. This reflected a deliberate decision by the board and senior management of the Institute to use some of our reserves to make some strategic investments, particularly, as I mentioned, to upgrade the Institute's technology capabilities. In light of the exponentially growing computing requirements associated with genomics and personalised medicine research, the board considered that this one-off strategic investment was a critical prerequisite to future-proof the Institute and enable the continued growth of our research efforts. Following the establishment of a dedicated off-site data centre for the Institute, we are now very well placed to not only continue, but indeed expand on our life-saving work in childhood cancer research. Let me now talk about our fundraising performance. For the past few years, our fundraising success has contributed significantly to the growth of our research endeavours, and 2019 was no exception. As I mentioned, overall, fundraising raised almost $20 million in 2019, with growth across all income streams except bequests. As I mentioned last year, the team continue to focus on driving this income as effectively as possible, so that for every dollar invested in fundraising, at least $3 is raised. Whilst there are many activities that have driven this performance overall, it is particularly encouraging that 2019 saw our single largest philanthropic commitment by a generous family of $2.4 million for Levi's project to fund research into the aggressive brain cancer, DIPG, over the next 3 years. The Zero Childhood Cancer Capacity Campaign is another example of the impact of generosity at work. Under the leadership of Anne and Mark Lasberger, with passionate support from a committed team of influential people, over the past 3 years, the campaign has raised over $10 million of the $12 million target to fund the Institute's world-leading personalised medicine program for children with aggressive cancers. In addition to the support of philanthropists, we are fortunate to benefit from the success of many of the community committees that run events such as the Balmoral Swim, Live for Lily Butterfly Ball, Neuroblastoma Australia Run to Cure, and the Townsville to Cairns Bike Ride, to name a few, together raising a massive $1.3 million last year. And when you consider those fundraising activities are run by these volunteer committees on top of their day jobs, this is a truly remarkable contribution to our research efforts. Our own signature events also continue to deliver wonderful results, including the CEO Dare to Cure program, which grew income by 40% year on year to $660,000, with 97 senior executives taking to the trapeze or snake bath or some other dare to demonstrate their commitment to curing every child of cancer. And of course, an event many of you here today will be familiar with, the Diamond Ball, which raised over $1 million in one night last September. From a marketing viewpoint, we generated significant media coverage over the year, including the announcement in May of the $5 million Minderoo support for our Zero Childhood Cancer program. And overall in 2019, your Institute's fundraising and marketing team helped the Institute to reach a total audience of 30 million people and generated $12.4 million of in-kind media value. An incredible effort by the team. Let me now just talk about government and partnerships. 2019 has undoubtedly seen one of the most important milestones in the Institute's history, with the announcement of the funding support for the Children's Comprehensive Cancer Centre, which will co-locate the Institute and its world-leading research and the Kids Cancer Centre, Australia's leading child cancer care unit. Planning for the Quadruple C has commenced, and we expect the building to be completed within the next 5 years. We're deeply grateful to both the federal and state governments who have so generously provided their support for this venture. And of course, I would also like to acknowledge the University of New South Wales, who are a key partner with this project. Over the past year, we've also continued to work closely with Medicines Australia, the pharmaceutical industry peak body, to establish a dedicated working group within the Oncology Industry Task Force, specifically aimed at easing access to novel medicines for children on our national personalised medicine program, Zero Childhood Cancer. We're particularly delighted that our national efforts have also led to our Director of Research, Development and Partnership, Peter Waybora, being asked to join the European efforts in this field, funded through the European Union. Our efforts of working with the federal government over 2019 have also most recently resulted in yet another milestone event, namely the announcement of funding of $67 million by both the federal government and the Minderoo Foundation to provide access to the ZCC personalised medicine program for every single child with cancer in Australia. This is a truly momentous development which recognises the potential of the program to shift the dial in the fight against childhood cancer. I want to now just touch on some board and governance issues. Last year, Tracy O'Brien, Simon Lewis and Vlado Perkovic were appointed to the board. They were each appointed as directors by the board itself, rather than being elected by you, the members. Each of Tracy, Simon and Vlado must accordingly retire from the board, and if they wish to do so, they can offer themselves for re-election at this meeting of members. And I'm delighted to inform you that each of Tracy, Simon and Vlado are indeed offering themselves for re-election today. And I will have more to say about each of them in a moment when the formal resolutions are put to the vote. Let me now just talk briefly about the future. Before I move to the formalities of the meeting, I wanted to briefly say something about some recent developments and how they are shaping the future of the Institute. I should start with the obvious, which is the impacts of COVID. Today is a stark reminder of the way this virus has affected organisations like the Institute. Whilst it's not ideal that we can't meet in person, as I said at the outset of this meeting, I nevertheless thank you all for the many and varied contributions that you have all made over the last year and continue to make. And it's testament to the agility of this incredible organisation that we've been able to hold this AGM in the way that we've done. It's been very much like the proverbial duck seeming to glide effortlessly over the water whilst paddling frantically underwater and out of sight. The team have made this AGM possible, have done a superb job, and I thank them all on your behalf. I mention that as a tangible example of the way in which the Institute has adapted so well to this strange COVID world in which we're now living. Whilst we will be dealing with the COVID impacts for the Institute for many months to come, I can assure you all that the Institute has adopted detailed plans to address the many financial, human resources, safety and other risks that have arisen from this crisis. We are in good hands and we are in sound financial shape because of those plans that are in place. I would like to particularly thank all of the Institute staff, many of whom are present today, for the personal sacrifices you have made, particularly reducing your hours by 20% to allow the Institute to make the necessary adjustments to come out the other side of this crisis in a sound financial and operating state. Most importantly, with all of you still employed in your critically important roles. Your loyalty and personal financial contributions speak volumes about your dedication to the Institute's mission. Thank you. Whilst the challenges of COVID might seem overwhelming at times, I know we're now starting to see, hopefully, some light at the end of the tunnel where perhaps we can return to more normal ways of doing work. I'm confident that we will emerge from this as an even stronger medical research institute leading the fight against childhood cancer. We have much to look forward to with our growing world leading research efforts and a future in the new QCCC. So that concludes my chairman's address. I'd now like to move on to the formal part of the business for this year's annual general meeting, starting with the adoption of the minutes of last year's AGM, followed by the presentation of the financial statements of the Institute. And that's when, if you have questions about the Institute more broadly, or if you'd like to ask questions of the auditor, it would be appropriate to raise them while we're dealing with that agenda item. And of course, the election of our 3 newly appointed directors of the Institute. Before we begin, I can confirm that we have the required quorum to carry on this AGM. I also remind the meeting that only eligible members of the Institute are able to vote on the meeting's resolutions. And as mentioned earlier, voting will be conducted by a virtual show of hands using the raise hand button. A resolution will be taken to be carried if more than 50% of votes are in favour. Apologies have been noted. Can I ask if there are any late apologies from anyone? This is when I'm just going to pause and look at the technology. I can't see any indications of anyone raising their hand or otherwise. So I'll take that as no late apologies. The notice of meeting, a copy of the minutes of the last AGM and the financial statements have all been made available to members prior to the meeting. So I'll take the notice convening this meeting as read. So to the first item on our agenda, which is the acceptance of the minutes of our last meeting of members, which was our annual general meeting held last year on the 20th of May 2019. I confirm that we have 16 proxies that were received prior to the meeting, and all of those are in favour of the resolution. None are against the resolution. I would like to ask for a member to move that the minutes of the last AGM as circulated and tabled at this meeting be accepted, and I also ask after that for a second member to indicate their support of the motion. Do I have a proposer? Richard Henry, thank you. If you can lower your hand. And a seconder, Deb Coakley, thank you, Deb. You can lower your hand as well. All right, thank you. Would anyone like to speak to that motion? Again, if you'd like to, raise your virtual hand and you'll then be unmuted. No one wants to speak to the motion. Hopefully the Secretary got the minutes accurate, that being the case. If not, I'll put it to a vote to accept the minutes of the AGM held at 20th of May 2019. All those in favour, if you could please raise your virtual hand. Thank you. And lower your hands after that's been recorded. Thank you. Anyone against that resolution? Raise your hand. No one against. Based on the proxy votes and raised hands, Peter, can you just confirm we've got a majority?
And confirm we have a majority.
Okay, thank you. Motion approved. We can move on to the second item of business, formal business for the AGM, which is to formally present the financial statements for the year ended 31 December 2019, the Director's Report and the Auditor's Report of the financial statements. I've given you an overview of the key highlights of the financial performance of the Institute in 2019 earlier in my address. Whilst it's not necessary for members to adopt the financial statements, now is the opportunity for members to ask any questions or make any comments about the Institute and its financial performance, or more broadly concerning the Institute and its performance in 2019. Does anyone have any questions or comments they'd like to raise about the financial statements, to ask of the board, its management team, or the auditors? If you do, please use the raise hand button. Okay, I'll just have a quick look and see at the Q&A. Sorry, I have to go up and down like that. I'm looking at two screens, folks. It doesn't look as though we've got any questions through the Q&A function, Peter, at this stage.
No questions.
Yeah, and no one's raised their hand. So Michelle, that must be a great endorsement of you and the team that have run the Institute perfectly in 2019, and the board have kept out of the way. Thank you, everyone, for your support. As has been consistently the case in recent years, we got a clean audit report again, which speaks volumes for our finance team. All right, well, we can now move to the third item, formal item on the agenda, which is the election of directors. In accordance with our constitution, 3 directors must retire from the board each year, and they may offer themselves for re-election. As I said earlier in the meeting, at this year's AGM, the 3 directors who are retiring and offering themselves for re-election are those directors who were appointed to the board by the board itself last year, and they are Associate Professor Tracy O'Brien, Mr. Simon Lewis, and Professor Vlado Perkovic. Each director needs to be voted on separately and individually. I will call for a mover and a seconder for the election of each director separately, but before doing so, I wanted to provide you with some background on each of Tracy, Simon, and Vlado, and why your board appointed them to join the board last year. For those who don't know her, Tracy is a paediatric oncologist at the Sydney Children's Hospital at Randwick and is the head of the Kids Cancer Centre. As your institute is increasingly focusing its translational research efforts on collaboratively working with clinicians, it is very timely that we were able to secure Tracy as an addition to our board. Tracy is a critical member of the clinical team we've been working closely with on our personalised medicine program, Zero Childhood Cancer. It's also timely that Tracy joins our board as we look forward to the Institute moving from our current location in the Lowy building on the UNSW campus to the recently announced Children's Comprehensive Cancer Centre, which is to be built on the land adjacent to the hospital. This is a truly exciting project that will bring together on the one site clinicians, medical research and education, all focused on beating childhood cancer. And I know Michelle will talk more about this exciting development later in this meeting. Simon Lewis is one of our leading information technologists in this country. He's a partner with IT Newcomb, which is an IT consulting firm. As the Institute's demand for big data increases dramatically, we're very fortunate to have Simon on our board to help support and guide the Institute, particularly as we navigate the considerable changes of the Institute's demand for and uses of IT. For those who don't know Vlado Perkovic, he is the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine at the University of New South Wales and comes to the Institute with a depth of experience with medical research institutes. Prior to becoming Dean of the faculty, Vlado was the Executive Director of the George Institute. He's also a former President of the Australian Association of Medical Research Institutes. So we are very fortunate to have Vlado join our board at this critical time when more than ever we need to continue to find ways to build on our existing very good and strong partnership with the University of New South Wales. Whilst we're excited to have three such preeminent people, leaders in their fields, to join our board in 2019, I wanted to publicly record our gratitude for Professor Bill Ledger, who retired from the board since our last AGM. Bill served on our board for 2.5 years, and he played an integral part in the Institute's governance during the most ambitious, exciting, and challenging growth period in its history, in the initial planning stages of the Children's Comprehensive Cancer Centre. So thank you again, Bill. Let me now move to the formal resolutions for the election of our three most recently appointed directors. For a director to be re-elected, a majority of votes cast in person or by proxy must be in favour of the re-election. Again, I can confirm that proxies have been received prior to the meeting, and the tally for those proxies will be shown on screen as we move through each of the individual voting resolutions for the directors, starting with Associate Professor Tracy O'Brien. Could I ask a member to propose the motion and to second the motion to elect the Associate Professor O'Brien as a director by using the raise hand button? Thank you, Michelle. As a proposer, you can lower your hand, and Murray, as a seconder, lower your hand. Thank you. Would anyone like to speak to the motion? We'll all collectively hold our breath, particularly Tracy. I can't see any hands raised. Last call. No, thank you. All right, well, I'd like to put it to a vote to elect Associate Professor O'Brien as a director. All those in favour, could you please raise your virtual hands? I'm the laggard, sorry, I've got to switch between screens. Thank you. That looks, everyone had a chance to do that? Yep, okay, you can lower your hand now. Thank you. Anyone against the motion? No? Thank you. All right, so Peter, can you confirm we've got a majority of proxy votes and in-hand votes?
I can confirm a majority vote.
Okay, thank you. As we've got more than 50% votes in favour, I declare the election of Tracy as a director of the Institute carried. Congratulations, Tracy. You can hear the collective claps. The crowd would be roaring if we didn't have them on mute. Thank you. Sorry, I just got to get back to the right screen. Bear with me. All right, now for the election of Simon Lewis. Could I ask a member to propose the motion and to second the motion to elect Simon Lewis as a director? Again, by using the raise hand button. While we're doing that, you can see that 16 proxy votes were received, all in favour, none against, as there were for Tracy. I should have recorded that. I can't see the hands being raised.
Yeah.
Just do that, sorry. Thank you. All right, thank you. Lower the hands. Anyone against the motion? You can lower your hands. Anyone against the motion? No? Okay, again, Peter, the proxy votes plus in hand got a majority.
And confirm a majority vote.
Thank you. All right, it was my pleasure to confirm that, Simon, you've been elected as a director of the Institute with the vote carried unanimously. Congratulations on my namesake, Simon. There can never be enough Simons in the world. Well done. Okay, on to our third and final board election. Could I ask for a member to propose the motion and another to second the motion to elect Professor Vlado Perkovic as a director, again by using the raise hand function, please. Okay. Can now lower the hands. Would anyone like to vote against the motion? No hands showing. That being so, I think we can then just take the tally. Peter, confirmation of majority again?
You can confirm a majority vote.
Thank you. All right. Again, congratulations, Vlado, on your re-election as a director of the Institute. We're looking forward to you continuing to work with us. All right. Well, that was the last official item of business on this year's AGM, and we'll now move on to the informal part of today's AGM. It's my pleasure to invite the Executive Director of your Institute, Professor Michelle Haber, AM, to now address the meeting with a particular focus on the research achievements of the Institute over the last 12 months and on some future developments of the Institute. Incidentally, if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask of any of the board or of Michelle, feel free to use the Q&A function during the course of Michelle's address, and we'll seek to answer them after Michelle's spoken. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone, distinguished guests, fellow Institute directors, colleagues, friends and supporters. It's wonderful to have so many people joining us today, as every one of you here is part of our extended Institute family. I do want to acknowledge in particular the families of children with cancer joining us today, especially Jack and Annette Cassis, who were part of the founding team for Children's Cancer Institute over 40 years ago. Although we are dealing with somewhat challenging circumstances for this AGM, I'm very glad to have the opportunity to share with you some of the highlights of the year, even if it has to be virtually and not face-to-face. It goes without saying that the COVID-19 pandemic is having a significant impact on our operations. But while we have had to make major adjustments, our research has continued, our critical patient-facing minimum residual disease and zero childhood cancer programs have continued unabated, and we have not allowed this situation to seriously interrupt the major momentum we built during 2019. We've worked very hard to maintain our connectivity, both within and across our teams, and to bring everyone through this COVID journey together. And so it's been very gratifying, therefore, that 96% of our staff have said in a survey that they believe that we've handled the situation well. And I want to thank our staff and our leaders, both of our research and our operations teams, for their overwhelmingly positive approach, for their support, flexibility, resilience, and, as Simon indicated, willingness to make sacrifices. We have been absolutely united in our purpose, which has been to protect the Institute and its people at all costs. And I have to say, it's times like this that our vision has really shone through. So thank you to every one of you. As we now look back at 2019, without doubt, as Simon has mentioned, the most significant announcement was that of government funding for Australia's first Children's Comprehensive Cancer Centre, our new home of the Institute, together with the Kids Cancer Centre at Sydney Children's Hospital. This will, without doubt, become the epicentre of childhood cancer research and clinical care in this country. This world-class facility, also involving the University of New South Wales, will have a single united strategy based on total integration of research and clinical care, which will allow us to move the discoveries that we make in the laboratories into the clinic more rapidly than ever before for the benefit of all kids with cancer. Planning for the centre is continuing at speed. We've even had meetings this morning, and has not been abated by the COVID-19 pandemic, with the opening still scheduled for early 2025. It is extremely exciting to be seeing this project come to life, particularly as it truly recognises the Institute's unique standing in the national and international childhood cancer research community. Aligned to our Institute's strategy, one of the key research initiatives introduced in 2019 was the reorganisation of the Institute's research teams into 5 overarching themes. This new structure capitalises on our key strengths and is designed to maximise our connectivity, engagement and collaboration. And whilst this is still in its earliest days, with COVID having had actually a significant impact on its progress, there are already a number of benefits being delivered. All our 4 team leaders, newly independent researchers and hopefully future leaders of the Institute, Drs. Josh McCarroll, Charlie de Bock, Orazio Vittorio and Far Valdez Mora, are now well integrated into their relevant themes. Within and across these themes, there have been a number of major research developments over the past 12 months. A highlight among these was the launch of a new focus on sarcoma research, with the appointment of Dr. Emmy Fleuren, a talented young researcher from the Netherlands with great passion and unique expertise in this area. Sarcomas are bony and soft tissue cancers that can be particularly aggressive in children and so require intensive treatment. And Emmy, working together with Associate Professor Paul Eckert, another of our new research leaders appointed last year, are determined to develop targeted therapies that are not only more effective than current treatments, but will cause far less damage to young bodies. This new focus on sarcoma research is part of our overall agenda to boost research into the most difficult to treat cancers, the cancers that are still killing far too many children. And on that note, as Simon mentioned, we were thrilled to launch Levi's project in August. This is a project named in honour of a young boy who tragically lost his life to DIPG, an incurable brain cancer which kills most affected children within 12 months of diagnosis. The aim of Levi's project, being led by Associate Professor David Ziegler and his team, is to develop what they call a total therapy approach for children with DIPG, similar to that developed over past decades for children with leukemia, based on the use of combinations of drugs which aim to offer these children the chance of survival for the first time. And while that's absolutely an ambitious goal, we are confident that we can achieve this, and in doing so offer real hope to the families of children with this devastating disease. We've also been working hard to improve the outlook for children with other aggressive cancers, including high-risk neuroblastoma and leukemia. And during the year, we made significant progress on this front, with a number of major publications in high-impact journals. And together with our clinical colleagues, we're now planning a raft of clinical trials that will test new treatment approaches pioneered in our laboratories in partnership with our international collaborators. In November last year, An exciting new strategic research opportunity for the Institute came with the award of $3.5 million from the Australian Cancer Research Foundation to establish the ACRF Child Cancer Liquid Biopsy Program. This is a unique opportunity to develop a highly sensitive but non-invasive approach for monitoring the progress of tumours in children, the response to treatment, and their likelihood of relapse, that is based on the analysis of blood or other body fluids rather than requiring invasive tumour biopsies. For children with cancer, this will mean less pain and distress, while for clinicians, it will mean an important new way to manage disease and optimise treatments at any point in the patient journey. It was particularly wonderful to have this award presented at Government House in Canberra by His Excellency General, the Honourable David Hurley, ACDSC, Governor-General of Australia, who, as many of you will know, has been a long-time supporter of the Institute, frequently hosting events at New South Wales Government House on our behalf in his previous role as Governor of New South Wales. In that regard, it is particularly heartwarming to note that the Governor-General and his wife Linda have recently agreed to come on board as official patrons of our Institute. 2019 was also an outstanding year for recognition of our people, with an unprecedented number of awards from major research and funding bodies going to our senior scientists, including Professor Maria Cavallaris, AM, Glenn Marshall, AM, and Murray Norris, AM, as well as our up-and-coming research leaders, including Angelica Merlot, who in fact became a mother just a few days ago. This is a wonderful measure of the quality and standing of our people in the research community, and I am very proud to see this recognition growing year on year. Finally, I'd like to update you on the progress of the Zero Childhood Cancer Program, our world-leading personalised medicine program for children with high-risk cancer, led in partnership with the Kids Cancer Centre at Sydney Children's Hospital. As I'm sure you're aware, the key principle of the Institute's research strategy is bench-to-bedside research, and nothing epitomises this more than this Zero program. Over 320 children have now been enrolled on the Zero National Clinical Trial, and we are well on our way to achieving our target for this first clinical trial of 400 children being enrolled by the end of this September. During the year, we received the results for the first cohort of children to receive the therapy that was recommended as part of their Zero personalised treatment plan. And we've been thrilled to find that over half of these children have had a positive response or had the growth of their cancer stabilised. And this is a remarkable result, given that these children had all exhausted all other treatment options, and this has truly exceeded our expectations. I'd like to highlight here Ness Tyrrell's remarkable leadership of this program in partnership with our clinical leaders at the Kids Cancer Centre, and also the major contribution of Associate Professor Mark Cowley and his computational biology team to the success of the Zero program, and you'll be hearing from Mark in just a minute. The program is much broader than the clinical trial though, and our ultimate aim from the start has been to have personalised medicine become the new standard model of care for children with cancer in Australia. We've advocated strongly with government to this end, and so it was hugely exciting to have the announcement come through just a couple of weeks ago that the Australian government and the Minderoo Foundation will be partnering to make the Zero Childhood Cancer Program available not just to those children with high-risk cancers as it is currently, but available to every child in Australia with cancer by 2023. This joint investment of $67 million through the government's Medical Research Future Fund and Minderoo's Collaboration Against Cancer initiative will allow us not only to roll out the program to all Australian children with cancer over the next 3 years, but also to create a comprehensive genomic data bank of each patient's healthy as well as cancer cells. And this unique database will allow our researchers to better understand the causes of childhood cancer, identify genetic markers that may be able to predict those at risk of the disease, and increase the ability to make better informed treatment recommendations. This means that we can begin to focus our research not just on treatment, but ultimately also on prevention. As the saying goes, prevention is better than cure. And wouldn't it be just wonderful if this program allows us one day to start preventing some children from actually getting cancer? I think that's a good note to end on. And as we look back on the first few months of this year, 2020 may certainly have been one of the most challenging that the Institute has ever been through. But I, like Simon, have every confidence that we will come through this pandemic even stronger than we went into it. We have a unique spirit here at the Institute, a fighting spirit and a united spirit. Thank you to each of you for all you have done and all you are doing now to help ensure that we will emerge stronger, more resilient, and even more focused on our mission of one day curing every child with cancer. Now, at that point, I just need to check the Q&A and see whether anyone has asked any questions, which they have not at that point. So it now gives me great pleasure to introduce Associate Professor Mark Cowling. Also just changing screens here. One of our recently appointed research leaders at the Institute. As I mentioned in my address, Mark and his team have made a remarkable contribution to the success of the Zero Childhood Cancer Program and have dramatically increased the Institute's capability in the areas of computation, big data analysis, international collaboration, and really allowing our Institute to be among the world leaders in child cancer precision medicine. Mark has rapidly and fulsomely integrated into the culture and life of the Institute, and I'm absolutely delighted that he is addressing our annual general meeting today. Mark, over to you.
Wow. Thanks for such a welcome as that, Michelle. What an amazing time to be at this Institute. And I'm going to take the next 10 minutes or so to really tell you about the computational biology program at the Institute, mostly framed around the grand challenges that we see coming up over the next year, over the next 5 years, many of which framed by events that Michelle has just talked about, and I'll talk in a little more detail too. This is us at the Christmas party, which was a lot of fun. Right. See if I can control this. Yeah, perfect. So what the computational biology group mostly focuses on is on precision cancer medicine. And that involves creating methods for accurately assessing the risk of a patient for developing cancer, accurately diagnosing them, predicting their prognosis, whether they're high or good or bad prognosis, and ultimately trying to use data and evidence to make informed treatment decisions, some of which we're thrilled to contribute to Zero and the success that Michelle's just alluded to, that some patients really are responding extremely well to these treatments. Let me get my timer up. Right. Obviously, this is a pretty biased view on precision medicine, being a computational biologist and a genomicist, but I really believe that these two technologies really underpin precision medicine. And I think the essence of this slide really is to tell you that data powers precision medicine at the moment. Data is growing in ever increasing numbers. It's sometimes overwhelming. And this is what I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about today. All right. Some of the grand challenges that we're trying to focus on. Michelle's already alluded to the expansion of the Zero Childhood Cancer Program, ultimately up to 1,000 patients per year. How the heck are we going to scale up from 150 to 1,000? This is the major challenge that's occupying our mind at the moment. What are the best ways to decode a patient's tumor, their molecular profile? How can we develop better methods, again, for diagnosis, prognosis, and therapy prediction, all while trying to scale up and ramp up this program so that the quality remains high and we don't suffer from this rapid expansion. Michelle's alluded to it, but how can we monitor patients' progress better when they're enrolled onto the Zero Childhood Cancer Program or other precision medicine programs? Can we accelerate our research and discovery progress through large-scale data sharing? We're interested in why kids develop cancer in the first place, of course, and whether we can develop methods that might help us ultimately identify at-risk kids and ultimately prevent them from getting the cancer. And here's the kicker, here's the really hard one, is how can we make the data from each patient or each experimental model and the experiments performed on those models, like drug screens, be used to inform the management of the patient that just got diagnosed today. A learning system where previous experience is used to inform the care of the next patient. That's going to be the hard one. Right. Some numbers. I love numbers. There's not too many graphs in this presentation, but I couldn't help myself. Sorry about the fonts, but essentially if you consider on the left, these green numbers indicate the expansion of recruitment every quarter through the growth of the next phase of 0, from 38 patients in the first quarter through 100, through 200. Ultimately, by the end of 3 years, we'll be recruiting 250 patients a quarter. At the end of the 5-year program, we'll have nearly 4,000 patients recruited onto 0. It's an astonishing number. We're pretty close to 400 right now, so it's a 10-fold increase over that. You think about it from a data perspective, the amount of data that we'll be storing quarter on quarter sees us with 2.5 petabytes of data by the last quarter of the program. It's 2,500 terabytes, it's quite a lot. The amount of compute that we need to analyze this data, we use a lot of cloud computing where we rent servers on demand. By the end of the program, we'll be doing 1.5 years of compute every single day by renting lots of servers at the same time. Quite a challenge. This is if we do things the way we're doing them today. I'm not going to bore you with the data plans, but we'll try, we have plans to reduce that footprint by 50 to 60%. The analytics, though, I think is a fairly interesting thing to pause on. Over here on the right is just a small excerpt of the genomic analysis pipelines that we've built over the last 5 or 6 years to analyze kids' cancer data. Each of these green circles is an analysis step in the pipeline. The steps are glued together with lots of input files and output files, and they're chained together. It's just a small excerpt though. The real pipeline takes 320 gigs of data as input, performs 80 different analysis jobs, run on 22 different server configurations from very small to very large, and takes about 5,000 hours to analyze each patient's genome. We need to work out how to do that more efficiently if we're to meet this challenge of the growth. I guess to put that into perspective, it's about $450,000 worth of compute and storage by the end of the program. So that's something we're focused on improving a lot. The major challenge is that each patient's tumor is unique. Each patient is born with 5 million genetic variants in their germline, their healthy cells, and each tumor requires another 1,000 to 1 million mutations. The major challenge is, what is this data telling us about each patient, and can we use it to inform their clinical care? Today, we do this with an awesome clinical curation team and a team of curators. This is just a small snapshot of the process, which currently takes about 7 weeks to analyze for each patient. Take-home message is that there's lots of steps, they're all disjoint, and there's lots of different technologies that are being used. We need to consolidate all of this so that we can accelerate the way we do precision medicine, and also to engage our partners around the country. We've engaged with 2 commercial software engineering firms, Secure Agility and We Discover, to take what is essentially a large series of spreadsheets, build them into purpose-built data-driven pipelines so that we can analyze and interpret this data. I don't think even the curation team has seen what these things are called wireframes. This is what the platform might look like. They're visually appealing, the data that matters jumps out at you, and we believe that this is a critical way to take the time it takes to analyze each case down substantially. So very excited about this. The next page. Right, Marie's already hinted at this, but essentially what I want to talk to you about is the ACRF's Centre for Childhood Cancer Liquid Biopsy Program. And if you consider over time here, and at some measure of disease burden on the left, is that patients currently get enrolled into zero childhood cancer, do this amazing testing, we get all this precision about what to do next. But after that, our clinical colleagues are telling us that they desperately need methods to understand how that patient's progressing once they've enrolled onto a precision medicine program. Consider these 4 patients. The purple patient does really well, The disease is essentially cured, but patients red, yellow, and green have disease which comes back. We need more information, and at the time we make our treatment recommendations, we don't know who's going to respond. So essentially what we're trying to do is develop a program where we can have minimally invasive testing at regular intervals based off what's now being called liquid biopsy. This is a blood test where we can identify circulating fragments of DNA or circulating tumor cells shed by the tumor and use this to harness our decision-making ability to identify the red, green, and blue patients earlier in the treatment journey. This is powered by an all-star cast of experts, clinicians, researchers. I want to specifically acknowledge Paul Eckert, who's co-leading this program with me, and Rob Salomon, the technical and operations director of the program. With this program, we aim to identify patients at high risk of early relapse, and by doing so, make earlier interventions into how maybe their treatment should be changed or intensified and improve their outcomes, much like the MRD program does for leukemia already. We have research ambitions to understand how tumors evolve over time in response to the treatments that we're subjecting them to. And ultimately, we're trying to work out whether liquid biopsy actually improves outcomes in kids, especially for kids with solid tumors where we really don't have this type of testing available. So this is an extremely exciting new program and one that'll keep us quite busy. I've only got a couple more things to say, and really it's so important to understand cancer risk and the genetic reasons why kids develop cancer. Today on the left, we have a very monogenic view of what cancer risk looks like. Patients with very bad genetic mutations in a single gene can identify these families where cancer is prevalent. And by taking this approach, 16% of the zero cohort has a monogenic risk variant that we think is contributing to their cancer. This is much higher than previously published estimates, which we think is due to the comprehensiveness of the program, the whole genome sequencing and the RNA sequencing that we've been performing. But we think we can do more. We know from other types of cancer and cardiovascular disease that these diseases are often caused by more than one genetic change. Increasingly, we're starting to think that it's not just one genetic change that causes cancer, it's dozens, often hundreds, maybe even thousands. So what this is coming up with is the term polygenic risk, where instead of almost a binary, yes, no, you're at risk of cancer, it's a much more quantitative estimate that you're high or low risk of cancer. We think the algorithms are there and the data will be there that we can make insights here, but ultimately this becomes a really hard challenge to translate to the clinic. How do you counsel a patient or a family member and them having a relatively low or a relatively high risk? Fortunately, there's lots of work underway in adult cancer trying to tackle exactly this challenge of how do you communicate this type of data to patients or unaffected family members with cancer risk. Really excited about this, and we think that the long-term ambitions are then to take these polygenic models to identify children at high risk of developing cancer and maybe enroll them onto screening programs so that they don't actually develop cancer in the first place. That'll be extremely exciting if we get to that. That's a long-term vision. This is the major challenge that keeps me up at night, is the idea of building a learning system where each patient that we've just looked at is used to inform the next. The molecular profiling of patient tumors on zero, the enormous expertise of Children's Cancer Institute with drug screening cell lines, with building animal models, identifying new targets, and the challenge of all the clinical responses that are happening in the hospital. How do we use that data and harness it to make more informed treatment decisions and recommendations about the next patient that just got diagnosed with cancer? Traditionally, these things happen in two very different worlds, from the research world to the hospital world, but fortunately we have excellent partners at the hospitals, clinical colleagues. And really the main challenge is how do we extract this clinical data that's buried away in the hospital system for research value? Sometimes the questions we want to ask aren't that well formed, but this is the major challenge, to bring all this data together, including the clinical data, to inform better patient care. This is the big challenge. This is a very long-term challenge, but really this, I've kind of skipped, I didn't expect that slide to be there. Really, the quadruple C, the Children's Comprehensive Cancer Centre, gives us a 5-year timeline to really focus our efforts on this. The last thing I'd like to talk about is data sharing. We've established a number of global partnerships to start sharing our data and accessing their data from St. Jude's and Philadelphia. And we believe that this new data that we can access is going to improve our understanding of childhood cancer and thus how to treat patients better. We've partnered with the Australian Bioinformatics Data Commons, which is the first national genomic data sharing initiative. And we are the flagship medical project, which has essentially brought together some of Australia's leading agencies in data and security and storage and analysis to help us with the challenge of sharing our data responsibly and enable a large amount of research. We're very excited about that. I think the last thing, as I've already kind of hinted, is that we have our eyes firmly set on the Children's Comprehensive Cancer Centre. In 5 years, we need to be doing things differently. Precision medicine needs to be part of standard of care. And if there's data solutions that we can build to help make that a reality, that's what we're going to be trying to do. So with that, I would like to thank this remarkable team of researchers, students, postdocs, engineers in the computational biology team. I'd like to thank our visiting scientists and an enormous array of funders that support our research. And a huge thanks to Nas Tyrrell for helping steer this and providing the leadership over the precision medicine program so that we can actually achieve the ambitious goals that we have. With that, I will stop. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Mark. Thank you so much for just a marvelous explanation of your research and for so beautifully demonstrating the impact of computational biology. And I'm sure everyone will agree that the capability that you and your team bring to the Institute is a marvelous addition to our research armamentarium in our fight against childhood cancer. Now to our Institute Award. Right, okay, sorry when those slides come up, right, okay. For newer members of the audience, this award, selected by our leadership team and presented each year at the Institute's AGM, is given to an individual who goes over and above the boundaries of their job description, who makes extraordinary efforts in pursuit of our vision and mission, and demonstrably lives all our values. The Institute Award recipient has been described as one of the most remarkable individuals at Children's Cancer Institute. Feedback from our leadership has included the following comments. One of the sharpest minds in the Institute, able to rapidly acquire and synthesize new knowledge across areas outside their field of expertise. And while we hired this person as a master of one trade, they have shown an amazing capacity to contribute to many trades. This person has an unwavering commitment to making a difference through excellence in everything that they do at their work. They bring a unique brand of organization, effectiveness, professionalism, and accountability to their role. They leave no stone unturned, and their pragmatic approach helps us to find effective solutions to challenging situations. A master of the hard art of saying no when required, while also providing logical alternatives. Someone who quickly builds rapport with stakeholders, both internally and externally, takes the lead on projects and drives progress to ensure a swift resolution for all parties. The projects that this person has supported have impacted the dollars raised for the Institute and externally have built strong relationships with the Institute's partners. And finally, this person has been described as a barrel of laughs, with a clever wit, entertaining life stories and positive attitudes. This person is a genuine and truly fun colleague to work with. They're a committed contributor to and driver of team spirit and morale, both on level 5 of the Lowy and Penny Lane on Friday afternoons after work. I am delighted to announce the deserving recipient of the Institute Award this year is our legal counsel, the wonderful Helen Brennan. We will be sending Helen, her award plaque and a ticket to TEDx Sydney, now scheduled for the 6th of November at the International Conference Centre, which we know she will enjoy. Helen, if you can bear with us, we'd love to bring you up on screen if you can just hold for a minute so that we can embarrass you by getting you to say a few words. If we can find Helen, that would be...
Hi. Should I call for a recount? I'm stunned. Thank you so much. I feel so lucky to work at the Institute, so thank you. But I just have to say, I'm part of a fantastic team, not just the legal execs, but everyone in my team and everyone I work with. This is the best bunch of people I've ever worked with, intelligent clients who take care to do everything they do well, and it's just a joy to work with you, so thank you.
Helen, it's just wonderful to be giving you this award. I'm absolutely delighted. You really deserve it. You make a huge difference to so many people at the Institute. It's fantastic. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Murray, and Helen, you'll get your award in due time. Thanks for coming on screen. Lovely to present it to you.
Helen, I should just interject and say there have been lots of Q&A comments saying congratulations. No one saying who would have thought that a lawyer would have a sense of humour. I should say, as a former lawyer, I'm allowed to say that. So, but congratulations, really fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Thanks, Michelle, and congratulations, Helen. That's fantastic, fantastic news. Okay, I guess no one can speak with greater authority about the impact of childhood cancer on a child than someone who has experienced this devastating disease personally. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce a courageous young lady who has not only survived cancer once, but twice. Kirsty Everett is going to share with us her journey from the moment of her first diagnosis to today. Kirsty's doctor at Sydney Children's Hospital was the wonderful Darcy O'Gorman Hughes, who many of you will know was instrumental in the establishment of Children's Cancer Institute. Throughout this time, Kirsty has been a loyal supporter of the Institute, always looking for ways to give back to our research. She is also passionate about sharing her experiences to help others and will be publishing her memoir, Honey Blood, next March. Here is her story.
It's Kirsty Everett, and I have something pretty cool that I'd like to share with you. I'm very excited about this. Ta-da! I've written a book. It's called Honey Blood, and HarperCollins are publishing it, and it will be released out into the world in March 2021. I made a promise to myself about 20 years ago that one day I would write this book, and I can finally say that I have ticked off maybe one of the most difficult things on my bucket list. My book is a memoir, so it's about one of the most eventful times of my life, which was between the ages of 9 and 21. I was first diagnosed with cancer when I was 9 years old. I was in grade 4 in primary school, and when I grew up, I wanted to be an Olympic gymnast. But cancer has a nasty way of messing around with your dreams. I was lucky enough to get the most common form of leukemia, which is acute lymphoblastic leukemia, or ALL for short. The only thing that I knew about cancer when I first got sick was that my uncle got cancer and he died. The man who looked after me was Professor Darcy O'Gorman Hughes, and not only was he the man who treated me for 2.5 years with chemo and saved my life, but without this man, the Children's Cancer Institute may not have come into existence. I feel like I'm sort of stating the obvious when I say that being on chemo in grades 4, grade 5 and most of grade 6 was extremely difficult. I was blessed to have parents who had already instilled in me a love of reading. I was a bookworm. I'm a self-proclaimed nerd, and I managed to keep up with my education while I was on chemo. When I started high school at the age of 12, I was in remission. I was off treatment, but the drugs that saved my life stopped my body from growing normally, I guess. So I am 144 centimetres tall, and I've been stuck at this height since I was a 12-year-old little girl. But the way I figure it, I would rather be short and alive than be dead. For the first 4 years that I was in high school, I did the thing that we're always told to do in life, but we don't always put into practice, which is live life to its fullest. I got myself involved in pretty much anything that I could. I was a high achiever in terms of my education. I joined the school's SRC. I began competitive debating and public speaking. I did singing, dancing, and acting classes. I got heavily involved in the theatre where I fell in love with William Shakespeare, and I went skydiving. I went swimming with sharks. I became an acrobat. When I was about 13 years old, Professor Darcy O'Gorman Hughes asked me one weekend if I wouldn't mind coming along to the University of New South Wales and just talk about what it was like to have cancer and what it was like to now not have cancer. And the guy saved my life, so of course I said yes. What he didn't tell me before I got there was that I was going to be speaking to a whole lecture theatre, and this lecture theatre was filled with families, and every single one of these families had a child in it that was on chemo. And from this day on, I became the girl that you'd call if you were trying to help people with cancer. By the time I was 16 and about to begin year 11 in high school, my life was absolutely jam-packed with so much great stuff. I had so many friends at school and in the theatre as well. I had been in remission for 4.5 years, and that's when my cancer came back again. Now, the first time I was diagnosed, I had about a 70% chance of survival. But when my cancer came back at the age of 16, I think I had about a 17% chance of survival. To be quite blunt, a lot of people just assumed that I would die. But I had the incredible Dr. Sue Russell looking after me. So in addition to the 2.5 years of chemo I'd had in primary school, I had to have another 3 years of chemo in order to get rid of cancer for the second time. The absolute worst thing about having cancer for me was watching other young people with cancer dying all around me. By the time I was 18, I had been to at least 18 funerals, and they were all for children and teenagers that had died of cancer. And this is something that was not okay with me then and still haunts me and is not okay with me now that I'm all grown up. The second time that I had cancer and was being looked after by Dr. Sue Russell, I sort of made it my unofficial mission to prove to anyone who treated me like I was going to die that they were wrong. And most of those great things that I was involved in, I still kept doing most of them while I was on those 3 years of chemo. I completed my HSC while I was on chemo. I still performed in the theatre when I was on chemo, and I still spoke at events to help people with cancer when I was trying not to die from cancer myself. And I'm very glad that I decided to have this approach because I'm still alive. And right now I'm literally living happily ever after, like for real. I'm not kidding. The life that I have now is absolutely incredible. I spoke at so many events for so many different organisations, but the Children's Cancer Institute was always my favourite, and it still is my all-time favourite. The main reason for this is that they are research-based, and they are the people who are working towards making treatment for young people with cancer less horrifying, and they are the people who will come up with a cure in my lifetime. It's just a matter of when. If you would like to know more about why this book that I wrote was so important to me and why the Children's Cancer Institute is so important to me, you might have to read this when it comes out in March 2021. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.
Wow, okay. I think that very clearly states why we're here and do the work that we do. I'm not sure if there are any questions for Kirsty at all, but if there are, our team and Kirsty, who's online, will come back to you with responses. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the Children's Cancer Institute AGM for the year past. I thank you for joining us online, but more importantly, I thank you for your support, commitment, and dedication to the great work the Institute consistently delivers. It only goes now for me to say to everybody, I hope you are keeping safe in these COVID-19 times, and we certainly look forward to seeing our supporters in person before too long. Thank you.